Today, we are covering the offer to purchase and contract. And again, like always, I'm not going to go line by line. We are going to talk about some things that are important and why. So why do I put this in this spot? So not just fill it out like this, also what's the reasoning behind it so that you can have the conversation with your client to be able to explain as well. So seller is whoever owns the property. If the property is in a trust, the seller is the trust. Okay, so if the property is owned by an entity, the entity is the seller. So for example, seller might be SM Ward Construction, Inc. Okay, and then Karen Ward, as a human, signs on behalf of SM Ward Construction, Inc. as vice president. Okay, so kind of the same concept with trust and estates. It will be it'll be a revocable trust of or estate of, and that power of attorney or that executrix is the human that signs on behalf of that entity.
And that's found in tax records.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. Buyer, of course, whoever the buyer is. One note that I will make about this is, and a lot of times we may not know, yet if you do know at the time, just check with the lender to make sure that both buyers can be on the offer to purchase, because if you've got two buyers and one buyer has fantastic credit and the other buyer has crap credit, the lender may say crap credit can't be on because now they're combining both of their credit scores and it's throwing it off. So we can always make an amendment, yet if you know that information up front, then just put the one person's name on there. If there's a manufactured home, this is where you would check that it will or will not. And then also off-site septic or separate septic lot. We don't have boat slips around here. I wish we did. So typically that answer is going to be will not, unless it is a property that has an off-site or separate septic lot. Street address, self-explanatory. When you get to your legal description, put as much information as you can in here. Reminder, I say this, and I know I'm not talking about anybody in this building, but let's not be lazy agents. The information is there for us. It's not, we've already pulled the tax card. So the tax card gives you all of this information. Plug it in, it helps the attorney and it also helps make sure whichever sides that, it helps ensure that we're talking about the correct property. So, plat reference, lot and block, you probably aren't going to have that information very much. That was the old tax reference system. They've moved away from a different system. Occasionally, there may be, if it's new construction, it might reference a lot in a community, that sort of thing. Subdivision, condominium, make sure you fill that in. Plat book and slide, if there is a plat book and slide, again, that's going to be on the tax card. So it's going to tell you the PIN number, any other description. So when you're looking at a tax card, a lot of times you'll see that it'll say PB 42-36 Macintosh, so that's the legal description. Throw that in there too. Other description, that's what that is in that kind of that middle box on the tax card. at the top. And then reference the deed book and page. Of course, we've pulled the deeds to ensure that the person that is conveying owns the property. So make sure you include that deed book and page. Purchase price, self-explanatory. Due diligence fee, we don't do cash. We don't recommend a client to pay a due diligence in cash unless they get a signed receipt. So typically we're going to go with official bank check, a wire, or electronic transfer. Electronic transfer is like a Venmo, a Zelle, a PayPal, any of those methods would be an electronic transfer. An additional initial earnest money, if there is any, and again, how it's going to be paid. Additional earnest money, kind of self-explanatory as well. Additional earnest money is time is of the essence. And so just make sure to keep that in mind. Assumption, we're not seeing many assumptions. If it is, we need to contact an attorney to assist us with that assumption because there's going to be additional paperwork. Seller financing, again, if it's seller financing, there is a seller financing addendum, yet I also recommend consulting an attorney on that just to make sure that
It's legal.
well, that, yes, that it's legal, and also, like, that seller financing addendum is a standard form. And seller financing could be very specific. And, you know, and also, what's the amortization schedule? The attorney can provide an amortization schedule for us. Building deposit, if it's new construction, might be a building deposit. And then, of course, the balance. So the balance is the top number minus any of the rest of those numbers. And what's the balance number? Earnest money. Why does that keep going here? I probably have like 14 screens of it pulled up somewhere now. Yeah. I'm scrolling one. Yeah. So, earnest money deposit, if there's an earnest money deposit, then you would name the escrow agent that is holding the earnest money. If there is not earnest money, you can leave this blank. Some people put buyer's choice because we may not know who, you know, they may not have selected their closing attorney yet. Though this specifically references the escrow agent. So if you know you're going to have earnest money, know who's going to hold that earnest money because you have to deliver it to that attorney within 5 days. And then these blue boxes, these are reads to understand, to help your client understand what happens if there's a dispute of the earnest money. We do not hold earnest money, so the in bold does not pertain to us.
There's no escrow account here, right?
That is correct. It always has to be held with an attorney. Yeah. It's a headache. It's one more.
Sponge.
One more thing, yeah. Effective date. So the date that the last one of the buyer and seller has signed or initialed, and such signing or initialing is communicated to the other party. So if, for example, you made a change so you were negotiating back and forth and we made a change, we decided, oh, it's not gonna be 5,000 due diligence money, it's gonna be 7,000 due diligence money. And you made the change on the original offer that you made, and the buyers initial it, but the sellers don't. We don't have a fully executed contract. Any change that is made from the original offer, the original paperwork, must be initialed by all parties
Dated.
and dated. Yes, yeah, and typically it's electronic, so it's on there anyway, but if it is, then yes, it would need to be dated. And so,
Going back to the earnest money real quick.
Uh-huh.
Do we normally use Taylor Law for that, right? Or is it, who selects that?
the buyer,
The buyer can just select.
the
it?
buyer selects who they want their closing attorney to be.
Right, okay.
Yes, yes,
Always,
always.
regardless of the county.
That is correct. In the state of North Carolina, the buyer has the right to select the attorney.
Closing attorney.
Yes,
And that's who every time we deliver the EMD to, right?
yes. So in other words, if they want Ashley Carter to do their closing for them, Ashley Carter would be the escrow holder. If they want Pittman Steel to do the closing, Pittman Steel would hold Paul Ortel and Coons. Taylor Law would hold it. Whoever they choose to do, the attorney to do their closing.
If they say, I just don't know who, just whoever you recommend.
Recommend
Say,
three.
hey, recommend three, okay.
Yes, they still have to choose. We can give you a list of great attorneys here in town. Which one would you use? You know, and then you just say, they all do a great job. Pick one.
Right.
You didn't steer it.
Yes,
Now, if there is the earnest money deposit and the escrow agent, would we just put the attorney's names themselves and then, not have to worry about like the firm that they're with, or do we also have to have the firm that they're with?
I see it done so many ways. Like I see it, like it'll say Pittman and Steel dash Jill Britt. You know, or I've seen Ashley Carter as opposed to Ashley Carter Law Firm, you know, that sort of thing. As long as it is an attorney, it can just be that person's name. It doesn't have to be, or it could just be the firm name. Bagwell Holt Smith might be, you know, it might just be the firm's name, because they don't, I mean, you know, this firm is gonna do it. They may not know which attorney is gonna close it at that time. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So effective date, everything must be, and then any changes, and this is where I will also say, if you find that there's a lot of changes, just do a clean copy. Just do a totally clean copy. Okay, this is what everybody agreed to. Here's a clean copy. If it's one thing, like, you know, you put personal property that the TV on the wall remains and the seller says, no, the TV does not remain. You can do a strike through and then just have everybody initial that. If you start, well, no, it's going to be this price and it's going to be this much due diligence and this much earnest money, and we're going to close on this date and this many days for due diligence. When you start getting into multiple ones, just do a clean one. Less confusing for everybody. Again, it explains what due diligence is, and then it also explains the due diligence fee. Very important when we are having the conversation. The due diligence fee shall be non-refundable except in the event of a material breach of the contract by the seller. So two instances that the due diligence is returned. One is you go to closing. So you get that due diligence money credited back to you at closing. The second is a material breach of the seller. That's going to happen in a courtroom. Has nothing to do with us. Yeah. We can't determine if the seller breached. It's not up to us to say the seller breached. that's something that has to be handled by attorneys. We've got a situation right now that the buyer asked for their due diligence money back, and the seller was like, well, what would I do that for? Why? I didn't, you decided not to buy the house because of the inspections. So the buyer is alleging that the seller knew about some issues that were in the crawl space.
Mhm.
Okay, well, now you gotta go to court, and the burden of proof is on the buyer to show that there was a breach there. And I just went back to the broker in charge and I said, it's not our money. We don't have it. The seller's not releasing it.
Right,
The
between
ne-
them,
Yep, it's between them, and the next step is attorney way beyond us.
So an example would be, like, if they went under a crawl space and they found, the inspector found a bunch of mold.
Mhm.
And the inspector said, yeah, I know this place has got mold. I was out here 6 months ago. It's infested. That would be a clear example of not disclosing a material fact.
That would be, yes, yeah. But if the inspector goes in there and they're like, God, there's mold all in this crawl space, surely the seller had to know about this. No,
Not going anywhere.
I've lived in my house for 24 years.
Never crawl up.
I have never been in my crawl space. I
Right.
don't know or care what's happening underneath there. So, I mean, when I answered no, I was answering truthfully.
Right.
So again, just setting that expectation, it's kind of like gambling when you're having the conversation with your buyer. Don't put up more than you're willing to lose. You can walk away for any or no reason, but you're not gonna get that money back. And, and then it also becomes a, like in this case, it's $7,500 due diligence money. Well, it's gonna cost the buyer more than $7,500 to hire an attorney to go to court to get their $7,500 back. That,
Like, is it really worth it?
right. I mean, like back during, during COVID, crazy time, we were seeing like $250,000 due diligence money deposits and things like that. Okay, when you get to that number and you have a pretty good feeling about it, I mean, they even said I was having a conversation with the broker in charge. The broker in charge even said the buyer consulted an attorney not to retain, and the attorney said it's gonna cost you more to do this, than your $7,500.
Get it back.
Yeah, yes. So just reminding people that it is not, we set the expectation that it is credited back to you at closing, otherwise it's non-refundable.
and then we just walk away from that situation, right?
Oh, we're out. Yeah, I mean, that's between them, because we don't have that money.
Right.
We're not in that,
Loop.
yeah.
I mean, we can still work with the buyer maybe on another property, if they still wanted to.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But as far as any dispute over earnest money and any dispute over due diligence money is handled by attorneys, not by us. We can communicate and facilitate and support our client and recommend them to professionals and that sort of thing. We just can't make the decision for them, and we're not attorneys, so we're just staying in our lane. You need to talk to an attorney. Well, what do you think? Well, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm not an attorney. You need to talk to an attorney. Like, you just have to continuously, because they want us to fix it, but we can't fix it because we don't have the money. We don't have the due diligence money and we don't have the earnest money. So due diligence period, two different options here. One is a date or number of days. Pick one or the other, not both. So it either ends on April 30th or it ends 21 days after the effective date.
And that would be business days, calendar to
Calendar
right?
days,
Yeah.
yeah, always calendar days. Yes. And then settlement. When is settlement going to take place? And again, this can be a date And it can be, or it can be a 30 days after executed contract, or it could be 14 days after end of due diligence, as long as it's specific. So whatever is in there, I should be able to look at the calendar and say, okay, so 21 days here, and then let's say 7 days here. Okay, I'm gonna count 28 days from the effective, and that's what that date is. But you can put, the reason for that is that sometimes if there is a delay in getting the contract signed, then it kind of, it messes with your, if you put a specific date, like, oh my God, did we lose 4 days because it's a holiday weekend and the sellers left on Friday to go out of town, they're not coming back till Monday, they don't DocuSign, they have to wet sign everything. So we just lost 4 days, right? If I put that specific date in there. So it can be done either way.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What's typical between the due diligence and the settlement date as far as number of days? Should they follow each other within a week or two or?
It's hard to say, because
Generally speaking.
generally speaking,
Due
20,
diligence would be
21 and 30,
21,
21 and 30.
generally.
After
not
the
due
due diligence?
No, 21 days
Due
for due
diligence.
diligence,
Generally.
30 days to close. Unless
Okay.
it's an FHA or a VA loan, and then you might want to go to 40 to 45 days on the close.
Right. I think we may have covered this a minute ago, but I think I missed it. Who do they make the earnest money check out to?
Earnest money is made out to whoever the escrow agent is going to be, also known as the closing attorney.
So if that hasn't been selected by the time it needs to happen, or does it have to be?
Yes, so you select if there's going to be earnest money when you're making the offer.
I mean, the attorney part, like who to make it out to?
Yep,
Okay,
yeah, because you have to deliver it within 5 days.
with this as well. Okay.
Yes, yes. Once this is executed, then they have to deliver it within 5 days.
What if you're on the listing side?
If you're on the listing side, then, that part of it, so.
They make the decision, they know who to make it out to. and
Right,
they deliver.
so when we're going through offer to purchase in this class, for purposes of this class, it's mostly on the buyer side, how to write the offer to purchase.
Got it.
On the listing side, it just comes in as it comes in. Now from the list side, you're just negotiating with your client on what those terms look like.
Got you.
Okay, settlement. Goes through a lot of things, that anything that is in, all caps, bold, has a blue box or a red box around it is a warning or something you need to pay attention to. So delay in settlement. So what happens if we don't close on April the 30th? Okay, well, then we need to go to paragraph 12 to understand what happens if we don't close on April the 30th. M just defines what closing is. The red box just says must be performed by an attorney that is licensed to practice law in North Carolina. So like for Kevin from Florida, they're a title state. So they can have a title company do the closing.
Which is owned by an attorney.
Yeah.
Supposedly,
Yes.
allegedly.
So we are an attorney state, so, and it's interesting because I was talking with some folks, and they're from Maine. And they were like, we have to use an attorney. I'm like, yeah, you gotta use an attorney. Well, do we have to talk to them? Well, just the day that you walk in there to sign the paperwork, other than that, no, you don't have to talk
Name
to
it,
them.
name it. Just listen.
New Jersey too, attorney.
Yes,
They
yeah.
have a hard time getting their head around it.
Yeah,
They don't trust you.
right, you're just like an attorney.
Title
Ugh,
company.
I don't have to use an attorney. Special assessments, it references special assessments, buyer and seller's respective responsibilities for payment of special assessments are addressed later. Typically for special assessments, it is anything that was already in place is the responsibility of the seller. Anything that occurs after would be the responsibility of the buyer.
Unless it was negotiated.
Exactly, yes. Fixtures. Fixtures included in the purchase price. All of these things are included in the purchase price. You don't have to spell them out anywhere else. These are things that, all of these are things that are either attached with a screw, are permanently planted in the ground, or serve some purpose for some part of the house that is attached by a screw. So think of a garage door opener. Okay, the garage door attached, the garage door opener, yeah, so garage door openers, generators that are permanently wired, invisible fencing, any of those, landscape and outdoor trees, except if they're in immovable containers, any raised garden, landscape, foundation lighting, outdoor systems, pools, anything, any of the equipment that goes with the pool or a hot tub, all of that, the mailbox remains. Unless otherwise, you know, for some reason, like I am really attached to this mailbox. Well, okay, but you have to replace it with another mailbox. Go ahead and take your mailbox down and, you know, move on. So all of this, remains, does not need to be, otherwise stated in the contract. Unpairing and deleting data from devices. So this is just a notice that the seller will unpair any paired devices, by the time of closing. And it survives closing as well. So if for, you know, whatever reason we close, seller didn't unpair his garage door opener from his smart car, and he has only moved 3 doors down, and he's driving down the road and he hits his button and your garage door comes open, and then somebody comes in and steals all the stuff out of your garage. Maybe your walk-through door wasn't locked. They come in and they steal all your stuff. That previous seller is responsible. So that's why that's just stating they have to unpair, turn it back to factory settings. Any fixture or other item that, items that are leased or not owned. Again, these may be, antennas, satellite dishes, receivers, appliances, alarm and security systems, solar panels would be another thing that, that are leased. It's important that we know those things. So if the seller says, oh yeah, the refrigerator remains, well, is it leased or do they own it? Because if it's leased, we need to know and make sure that it's paid off from the seller's proceeds at time of closing. And then we get into, solar panels as well. Who's going to, if they're leased and they're not paid off, who's going to absorb that, that expense? Satellite dishes and receivers, typically, they just tell you to, sometimes they'll, depending on how old they are, sometimes the company will say, box them up, send them back to us. Sometimes they'll just say, just throw it away. You know, if it's old, because after about 6 months, they're so outdated anyway,
Right.
that they don't want them back.
Typically, the solar panels, wouldn't there be a lease on the property, a lien on the property?
Yes,
Typically,
yes,
generally speaking.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the buyer needs to know that, because the buyer needs to know, oh, well, they still owe $14,000 on these solar panels. The solar panel company has a lien on the property.
Which would come out during the title work.
It would come out during the title work, but it depends on the company, because it also can be transferred to a new buyer.
doable,
Yes.
payable upon
Yes,
sale.
yeah. So they're not always paid off at the time of sale. We just need to get clarity on, are they going to be paid off at the time of sale?
Right.
Because
Is the buyer responsible to continue the balance?
that's correct. So because that contract can be transferable to the new owner. And that's when the buyer would then be responsible for any unpaid balance. Exactly. Yep. Other items that do not convey, again, this is grandma's chandelier. Take grandma's chandelier down, pack it up, put it in a box,
Okay.
replace it with a like kind based on the house. So when I say that, not necessarily, that you're gonna be able to find a look-alike of grandma's chandelier, yet if this is a $500,000 house, do not go to Lowe's and buy the $30 brass, that has 3 things sticking up or whatever. I mean, be reasonable about what it's being replaced with. But again, this is just identifying any items that do not convey. Personal property, this is where you would list any personal property on the date of the offer, and it's going to be transferred to the buyer at closing at no value. This might be where you would specifically state the refrigerator in the kitchen. Again, we know it's at time of offer. The refrigerator in the kitchen, the washer and dryer, those sorts of things. Occasionally you'll run into other things, TV mounted on the wall, those sorts of things that a buyer may ask for. If it starts getting into, well, we like the bedroom suit. Oh, we like that sofa. We like that coffee table too. Can we get all of this stuff? And then that needs to be handled on a personal property bill of sale separately outside of, because again, we're selling real property. We're not selling personal property. Personal property would be the things that commonly would transfer with a property: refrigerator, washer, dryer.
Would you put that on a forms addendum?
There's
Personal property, there's a need for that.
there's a
Says
form.
personal property?
Yes,
Okay.
bills and bill of sale, yeah.
Gotcha.
Even if the amount is zero, I mean, it can still be zero,
You want it to
or
be
a dollar,
clear.
or a penny, or,
Has to be
whatever.
clear.
We're just clearly getting it off of this, because when we start putting too much stuff here, like if we put, zero turn riding lawnmower, or, Kubota tractor, the lender starts getting a little suspicious, because those are not
Value
low,
items.
right, those are not low dollar items. So, that's where and that may be something that's a red flag to the lender, where they might not would do the loan. Talks about the buyer doing their due diligence. This includes loan, property investigation. It goes through inspections, review of documents, insurance. Can you get insurance? An appraisal ordered by the lender, survey, zoning, governmental regulations. Is it in a floodplain? Utilities, access, streets, roads, all of these things, which a lot of these also coincidentally not also show up on the professional services disclosure, where the buyer is either electing or waiving the opportunity to do some of these things. This is also the reason that in your listing and your buyer listing, it's in the listing tab in command. Buyer is in the under contract, that you are required to upload the deed, upload the flood map, all of these things, because we are assisting from our fiduciary duty in confirming that some of these things are or are not, like floodplain, for example. Sale lease of existing property is or is not. This is a big one. To explain this, all properties in North Carolina are sold as is. There does not need to be an as-is addendum. Some attorneys have drafted as-is addendums redundantly just to remind people that it's as is. The contract itself very clearly says the property is being sold in its current condition, unless otherwise agreed upon. The seller may, but they're not required to make repairs, negotiate any repairs. The buyer certainly has the right to do any and all inspections that they want to do, but that does not guarantee that the seller has to make any repairs or negotiate in any way for them. E just talks about the buyer's obligation to repair any damage. So during their inspections, any damage that may be caused from an inspector that they hired, the buyer is responsible for repairing any of that damage. So, for example, the home inspector falls through it's in the attic, falls through the ceiling of the room underneath it. The buyer has to fix that. An example of not is, because this is always going to happen, an inspector is in the crawl space and sees what looks to be deteriorating wood. He's going to jam his screwdriver in there and see, okay, how is this just, to what extent is it? That they don't have to fix that. They don't have to fix that hole. I mean, that went on for years. Well, they jabbed all in. I was like, it was rotten anyway. Like they didn't make any more damage. Yeah.
Overzealous.
Yes. Yeah.
How many times you need to put a hole in there to know it's rotted?
Right.
That was a big show.
Mm-hmm. So any damage that is caused that was not previously damaged anyway, the buyer is responsible for. Buyer's right to terminate. Again, we talked about this, that they have the right to terminate for any or no reason by delivering to seller written notice of termination during the due diligence period. Just because they deliver it during the due diligence period does not mean that they get their due diligence money back. What it does mean is that if there were any earnest money also attached, they would be entitled to get their earnest money back if it is terminated prior to the end of due diligence. And they talk about closing constitutes acceptance. Y'all know that. Okay, buyer representations. These are buyer representations. These are not contingencies or guarantees. So the first box is cash.
Don't scare me.
So if it's cash, that's the box you check. Or they're going to get a loan. And is it a first mortgage? What type of loan is it? We try to get what the principal amount is going to be. If you're writing a strong offer, then you want to put that in there. So if your buyer is getting, let's say they're putting 50% down. It's a $500,000 purchase and they're getting a loan for $250,000. It's a pretty strong offer to me. When I'm looking at it, talking to my seller, got this other offer over here that same price, $500,000, they're putting 5% down. That scares me a little bit, just based on and the amount of funds as well. And typically that, like you said, typically that one that's putting down 250, if the appraisal's off by like $5,000, we're not splitting hairs over it. Whereas that person that's only putting down 5% may not have the funds to, so they're, right, so they're gonna be loan heavy. So, think about that when you're writing the offer. Again, it's not a material fact. It's just a representation that the buyer is saying, I'm getting an FHA loan, or well, that has to be disclosed because there's a form that goes with it.
So no matter how much they're putting down, would you always put 500,000 or would you put 250 there?
No, I would put the amount that they're financing. So
250.
purchase price is 500
Okay,
and they're getting a loan for 250. That says to me, this is a strong buyer.
gotcha, I gotcha.
Yeah. Again, this just goes through, is it a second mortgage or, is it other funds? Other funds, this is where you would see if it's a hard money loan. The funds are coming from somewhere other than a lending institution, an investor, those sorts of things. Or it could also be, they are obtaining funds from a family member, which in essence would be cash. So again, blue box, read this. The buyer's obligations are not conditioned upon obtaining any loan or funds from other sources. Again, not contingent. So when you're thinking about your due diligence period, making sure that either you or you have a fantastic transaction coordinator that is ensuring that they are qualified for the loan within that due diligence period.
That would be the loan commitment is?
Yeah.
Is there a specific time frame for loan commitment?
Depends on the lender.
But I mean, as far as the contract goes.
No.
There's no
No,
specific.
no, because it's not contingent upon you getting a loan. That's all covered in the due diligence period. Yeah, I know.
Another thing.
It's a little different and
Yeah,
it's a change too, because
In some ways, I see some advantages though.
our contracts used to be where you could put contingent upon loan until our contract changed. So same for this old gal that's been doing this for 24
So
years.
you don't necessarily say I need to see a pre-approval letter.
Oh, I'm absolutely asking
wanna
for a
see that.
pre-approval letter before I ever even write this offer.
Entertain this, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you as the buyer's agent and then the seller's agent
Of
gonna wanna
course.
see that.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or proof of funds if it's cash.
Yeah, exactly. Buyer does or does not, I'm sorry.
Side note question, for the pre-approval, do you get that before you even show properties?
It depends. I usually will show them one.
Okay.
For a lot of reasons. Number one, to determine if I even want to work with them.
Right,
And, secondly, it is, you have to think about how much have I screened them on the front end. So I go through a whole screening process before I'm ever meeting them at a property. Are you working with a real estate agent? Have you talked to the lender? I'm asking all of these questions prior to, okay, hi Pete, come on in. Come on in, you're good. I am. So I'm asking them all of these questions and then I'm saying, okay, I'll meet you at the property. That's an opportunity for me to continue to build a relationship with that person. And from there, then we have the discussion about getting buyer agency signed, because at this point, I may have just taken the one-time show form for them to sign. Then we start talking about buyer agency. You need to get pre-qualified. That's step one. Because if we find the perfect house and there's 4 other offers on that house and you don't have a pre-qualification letter for me to send with the offer, you're not going to get the house. That is step one. Okay, does or does not have to sell. If they do have to sell, well, now we're also talking about, is it under contract or is it not under contract? If it is under contract, you can request a copy of that contract. There are certain things that obviously the buyer agent can redact on that. You can request a copy of that, because even though it's not contingent, we sometimes use the verbiage of, well, it's contingent upon them selling their house. Yes, it is, but it's not contingent upon them going through with this contract. It's just saying, it's disclosure, it's saying we have another house to sell. So I would, as if I'm the listing agent and I'm reviewing this contract, I'm asking the buyer agent for a copy of their current contract on their house. Again, the buyer's name can be redacted. Purchase price cannot be redacted. Any due diligence money, earnest money, all of that. Things I'm looking for. Purchase price. When does their due diligence end? When is their closing date? The loan is the other person. Do they have a house to sell before they can, how many dominoes have to fall before it gets to mine? Would all be things that I would be considering. If it's not under contract, then it is, it either is listed, it will be listed, or they're trying to sell it for sale by owner. Again, these are factors that I am advising my seller on whether or not to accept this offer. This fool trying to sell this house by himself, ain't no way we're accepting this offer. Yes, ma'am.
There's no sale of buyer's addendum
No,
that would accompany this offer.
because it's not contingent.
So does this only apply to like houses in the state of North Carolina, or would this also apply
Nope.
to like?
Yeah, applies anywhere.
Okay.
Yes, so in other words, if they are moving here, so if this person is moving here from Texas and they have their house for sale in Texas, they still have to disclose that.
Just follow-up question.
Yes,
If the house has already been sold by the time that they're putting in the offer, would I still need to have that in?
no, because it's already closed.
Okay.
Yes,
But they can move forward and
Yeah.
not worry about it.
yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay, then we get to our disclosures of residential property owners association disclosure. The buyer either has or has not received it. Same thing with mineral oil gas. They either have or have not. Again, they have 3 calendar days to which they can, if they do not receive them and they decide to terminate within those 3 days, any due diligence money that had been paid will have to be returned. So kind of a weird exception, and we don't see it often.
What would be the reason that they wouldn't have received it?
Seller didn't provide it.
Okay, even if we add, but they have to provide it, right, or not?
According to North Carolina law, they do.
Right, okay.
What's the time frame for 3 days?
3 days. Yeah. Yeah, for both. And so there will be occasions where, it might be exempt from residential property and mineral oil gas. There are about 12 different exemptions. The ones that you are going to most often see are going to be, REO, foreclosure, bank owned, trust. The property's in a trust. It is exempt. Those are the, court ordered is another one you might occasionally see. If it's a court ordered sale, then it is exempt. There are other reasons for it to be exempt. We don't see them very much. If I transfer a piece of property to my husband or a family member, to, my mom and dad, it's not required. So if there's a transfer within family, neither one of it's exempt for both of those.
You said if they select buyer has not received and you send the, offer in, they have 3 days to get that to them?
They have, so the buyer has 3 days, in which to, for the document to be provided to the buyer for their review.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Upon receipt of.
Typically, would those be online, into addendum? would you,
It would
the
be-
listing, would you have that already filled
They would
out?
be, typically they're loaded in
Load,
MLS.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Yes,
you.
as documents.
Ask for the cooperative compensation at the same time you ask for the RPD, because don't put an offer in without an RPD.
Yes. Yeah, that's, I mean,
If you put an offer in without an RPD, you're,
I think you're doing a disservice to your buyer.
yes.
You know, and Kay, I mean, there are situations, circumstances that, you know, an investor might be like, I don't care. They're gonna check no representation down everything anyway, you know, but good point, Pete, and I agree. Did you have another question?
No, I was just verifying with what he was saying about the receiving the RPD within 3 days. Is that upon receipt of the offer itself, or would that be, okay?
Yes, yes. This just goes through buyer obligations, you know, none of these are contingent. This is just their responsibility and also their cost responsibility. So it now says in the buyer agency agreement that the buyer is responsible for any and all inspection costs. It's always said it in the offer to purchase. Now we tell them up front, and then we remind them when we're making the offer. You know, because notoriously that buyer is going to say after the home inspection, because the home inspector is going to say, consult HVAC contractor for further evaluation of the HVAC unit, right? Always, always going to be that way. The buyer is then going to say, well, I want to ask the seller to have the HVAC contractor come out. Well, you can ask them. But as a prudent agent, I'm going back and I'm saying, you know, the buyer's responsible for any and all inspections. Seller's not going to do any inspections on their behalf.
You want to know for sure.
Some agents will try, and you know, hey, the worst that can happen is they say no, right? And then we have seller representation, how long they owned the property, lead-based paint. We get into owners associations and dues. Again, if they are there, put them in there. Many times this will be on the residential property disclosure. If it's not on the residential property disclosure, get the information from the listing agent to be able to put that information in. Because again, the attorney is going to have to contact the HOA in order to any transfer fees, what's been paid, you know, what's already been paid, any prorations that may need to happen.
Is that the same for how long they've owned the home and all that? We just ask the seller agent?
So it's an MLS.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's, when you're putting something into MLS, you check a box that says how long they've, you know, they have owned or,
okay.
and so that it will be an MLS. Yeah. Yes,
Transfer fees.
yes,
There's some document that says the seller has to pay all the transfer fees.
yes.
Which one is that?
This one?
Then why does Isaac Gibson keep saying it's 2 and 2 for McIntyre? 200 for the seller, 200 for the buyer.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but he's the president,
I don't,
so you would think he would know.
tell me. You think you'd read the thing too?
Yeah, yeah. Read the contract.
Just saying.
Yes, yes. Fuel tanks, is or is not a fuel tank? If there are, again, let's just talk about, is it in use? So there might be a fuel tank and it might not be in use because it might be under the ground and it just has a little pipe sticking up. That's the only reason you know that potentially there's one there. Or there might be one of those cow looking things on the back, you know, at the back of the house. Again, might not be in use, just nobody's bothered to haul it off. So just because it is not, it could be an all electric house, there still might be a fuel tank there. This also pertains to propane fuel tanks that, again, most of the time are underground. The seller has a service with a company that comes and fills it up It is a leased item. They typically don't own it. They lease it from the oil company that they are getting the propane from. If they decide to change companies, that company comes and gets their tank and takes it away, and the new company comes and puts their tank in there. So those tanks are typically leased. Also, so again, just make sure that we are identifying those. Any of these tanks convey. They're included in the purchase price. The seller can't ask you to pay more because he just went out and bought a 100-gallon propane tank to, to use his gas logs or to hook it to his grill. And he wants to charge you for what he just paid for it. No, they remain, and any fuel that is in the tank as well. Interesting change. Our old contract, it was negotiable on who, in other words, the buyer could buy the fuel from the seller. It got to be a big old headache because we had to have the oil company go out, read the meter, how much fuel is in the tank, and then, and all this had to happen like right before closing. So thankfully, they said, nope, the tank and the fuel in it remain. I'm sorry that they just came out yesterday and it was $365, and now you're closing 3 days from now. The buyer gets that fuel. You can't suck it back out. Is or is not a lease. If there is a lease, they need to be provided, and they are provided by attaching an additional provisions addendum where it addresses the rent rolls, all of that on there. Again, these are reading topics for your pleasure. Access to the property, seller shall provide reasonable access. So the seller can't say, nope, you can't come in and do your inspections. Yes, they have to provide reasonable access. Reasonable works on both ends. Your buyer can't say, oh, because they're so excited. Oh, can we go back to the house tomorrow? Oh, and can we go again tomorrow? I really want to measure for blinds. Can we go, oh, I bought this comforter. I want to see if it matches the color that's in the bedroom. That's not reasonable. No. So both sides, it has to be reasonable. Removal of the seller's property. Seller's going to get all of their crap that they don't want and nobody else wants off of the property. They can't assume that the buyer wants it. Or, well, I thought you might want that. No, nobody else wants your junk. Seller has to remove everything unless otherwise agreed upon. So of course, personal property that has been agreed upon to remain. So seller's going to execute and deliver a general warranty deed. Sometimes it may be a special warranty deed. Depends on the property. If it's bank owned, it is going to be a special warranty deed. The only difference between a special warranty deed and general warranty deed is that special warranty deed only tracks it back to the owner, the previous owner. A general warranty deed tracks it back to Jesus. So
Which is the preferred.
general, yeah, it's preferred. But some of it, in some cases, you're just not. Yeah. If it's a bank owned property, you're never going to get a general warranty.
Look up. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Because nine times out of 10, if you don't look it up, it's a quit claim deed.
Yes.
And then you've got a question.
Yes, yes. Quit claim deed is then conveyed by special warranty deed. Because it was quit claimed without a title search. So they only make the representations
Up to that.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Owners Association fees and charges. seller shall pay any charges by an owners association or management company vendor as agent of the association under paragraph 9A. We talked about special assessments. Again, this is just saying, sellers shall pay in full at settlement all, special assessments that have been approved prior to settlement, whether payable in lump sum or future installments, and provide the amount. Negotiated repairs improvements shall be made in a good and workmanlike manner, and buyer shall have the right to verify same prior to settlement. So if you were on the buy side and the seller agreed to make a repair, get a receipt to prove that it was made, and go back out and verify that it was, that the repair was made. If it has not been made, there's a couple of options. The buyer can delay closing and not close until it is, or the attorney can hold the funds in escrow. It may not be able to get a credit because the lender might not allow a credit. See, we've already got full loan approval at this point. We're down to the day before closing, and you know, these 4 windows were supposed to be replaced and they haven't been replaced. And oh, by the way, they're on back order, so it's going to take 2 weeks for them to come in. So at that point in time, the buyer can say, okay, well, I'm willing to wait the 4 weeks. They just have to do their loan process over, you know, or if the guy is there installing them and they'll be done by the end of the day, then the buyer can say, we want to do another walkthrough tomorrow to ensure, and they get there and they're like, okay, well, yeah, this one doesn't look quite right. Instead of starting the loan process all over again, they would, the attorney would hold the seller's
Right.
money in escrow until the
Till
repair.
that's done.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, correct.
Rate lock.
Yeah.
Right now, rate lock. Let's see, use a little girl voice back there.
Home warranty either is or is not. Okay, here we go, Pete. Further, to go further into charges by owners association, seller shall pay fees incurred by seller in completing the residential property owners association disclosure statement and resale or other certificates related to a proposed sale for the property. Any fees required for confirming seller's account payment information on owner association dues or assessments for payment or proration, including any expedite fee permitted under the statute that's charged in connection with providing such information. Any fees charged for transferring or updating ownership records of the association. Any fees other than those specifically required to be paid by the buyer under paragraph 9 below. Buyer shall pay for charges for providing information required by buyer's lender, charges for working capital contributions, membership fees, or charges imposed for buyer's use of the common elements and or services provided to buyer in connection with buyer taking possession of the property, such as move-in fees, and charges for determining restrictive covenant compliance. Prorations, adjustments, everything's prorated and adjusted. Condition of property must be in the same or better condition as it was at time of offer. The tree falls through the house, the buyer does not have to buy it, and they would also be entitled to their due diligence money back. So very few reasons that the due diligence. Delay in settlement. We've got a delaying party and a non-delaying party. Summary point of it is you got 7 days or any other agreed upon extension. So Buyer's dragging their feet, buyer can't get the loan, seller's like, I want to terminate this contract. They can't.
Not for
7 days after the closing date,
I like to-
they can unilaterally terminate the contract.
Or they can agree to.
Extend, yes, yeah, yes. Possession, I'd like for you to just, cruise right past this section pretty quickly, because I don't advise it in any situation. Buyer possession prior to closing or seller possession after closing. There are addendums for that. There are situations and circumstances where that may need to happen. I wouldn't make it a common practice. These,
Screwed 85% of the time.
exactly, yes,
You call that a post-closing occupancy?
seller possession after closing. Yeah, our form is just called something different. Yeah, but it's, yeah, same thing.
Now, if you agreed on more time past 7 days, is there another form for that?
Oh, yeah, there's a form.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So once this document is fully executed, everybody has signed it. It gets put in the vault. Nobody touches it again. We don't change anything on this document once it's fully executed. Because we have a form that changes. So agreement to amend gives you the opportunity to change anything that can be changed within this document. So you would use agreement to amend. This identifies any addendums that might be attached to the contract, bless you. This talks about remedies when there's breach by the buyer, breach by the seller, those sorts of things. Read that, understand it, be able to, hopefully you don't ever have to use it. If it gets to the point where we think something has breached, please contact me and give me the story before we start pointing fingers or making accusations. So that we can handle it properly, whether it be buyer or seller. We will get the attorneys involved, yes, if needed. Yes. Again, so same thing on when we're talking about signatures. If the buyer is an entity, LLC, corporation, partnership, trust, any of those, name goes here, the name of the entity goes here. The human that is signing on behalf of the entity goes here, and then it's their name and their title. Same thing on the seller side. Reminder, page 14 and page 14, 15, and 16 sometimes tend to not get initialed. Just make sure that you continue the initials beyond, just because there's not a whole lot of, there's just verbiage on there. Not really.
Special KW form
Hmm?
for the wire fraud. There's special KW form for the wire fraud.
It's on there.
That's it.
Yes.
It's not a special.
No. We have a cybersecurity, but we don't have a special
They make
form.
us sign one.
Yeah.
for the KW
Yeah.
office. Make us sign a separate one.
You
No.
mentioned it 75 times. We got one this
You got what?
wire fraud.
Addendum, or you got wire
We
fraud?
got wire fraud. We didn't
Not
we
you,
didn't
but
do it, but
yeah,
luckily we caught it.
yeah.
Clever, on.
Who is the attorney? Wow.
Second time.
Okay, so on page 16, this is where we are disclosing agency, the agent on the other side, if it and yourself. So let's say that Katrina is the buyer agent and she brought the buyer, so she's going to be on the selling firm name, and she brought a buyer to Pete and Beth's listing. What boxes are we gonna check?
Say that again?
So Katrina is the buyer's agent.
Okay.
okay? Pete and Beth are the listing agent. Which one of these boxes here and here are we going to check?
Selling on the buyer and selling on the right.
Wouldn't we be dual?
Right, because the Keller Williams firm.
Right.
So Joy.
Yes. So dual, firm license, mailing address, all of this information is in MLS. Please fill it out as a courtesy
They're both
on the
dual.
other side. Both are dual, yeah, because they're both in this office.
Oh.
Yes,
If the firm license and all that's the same, basically in the same place, then it's still.
yes. Yes, absolutely. Good way to put it. And then we're gonna have Katrina's name here. We're gonna have Pete's name here. And we're also going to check this box on both sides. Because we're dual, remember, in Pete's listing agreement, his seller authorized him to practice dual agency and then further authorized him to practice dual designated, not him, the firm, to practice dual designated agency. In Katrina's buyer agency agreement, her buyer authorized the firm to practice dual agency and then further practice designated dual agency. So that's where we're also going to check that.
Now, is that verbiage included in the forms for the agency agreement, or is it something you have to check off?
Yep, it's in the
It's
agency agreement.
included, right?
Yes, whether it's the listing agreement or whether it's the buyer agreement. Yep. And then, again, license number, this information is in MLS. All of this information is in MLS, minus the fax number, maybe, I don't know, but a fax?
Do you have to put the fax on if you don't?
Who has a fax machine anymore? Other than attorneys, because they're required to, yeah. Carrier pigeon, you know. So just as a courtesy, enter that in on the opposite side that you are, that you're not on, that fill that in for the agent as well. And then the next page is just our confirmation, acknowledgement of receipt of monies, due diligence. You can always put in here, because a lot of times we don't touch the due diligence. We're not the middleman for the due diligence. Sometimes we are, but many times. So again, if it's a Venmo or a Zelle or something, they sent that money directly to the seller. We never touched that money. So there may be instances where we wouldn't sign here, or they may have mailed it directly to the seller. And so what I do is I just type in here, sent directly to the seller. So we're not signing for it. And then, of course, your seller does sign for it once it's received.
Get them to send you a picture.
Yes, yes. Even of the, when you send a Venmo or PayPal or any of those electronic, you can go into your app and look at your transactions and pull it up, and it'll show you, take a screenshot of it. Same thing on the seller side.
What's the best way to do it? I had trouble one time where I'm trying to keep all the wet signatures on the same form, but you're
Yeah.
having to give them to different people.
Yeah.
What's the best way to go about it?
I have to. So in Command, I just recently updated Command and kind of redid. So there's two separate places. In other words, sometimes you are able to get it all on one, and that's great. If you are, we understand that many times you're not able to. So there is a placeholder for copy of due diligence check. There is one. Or that screenshot of where it was sent electronically. And then acknowledgement of receipt of funds of due diligence. So you would, and you could,
So you can separate them.
you can separate.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because many times it is two different documents. Because you send one with the money to the attorney, or the attorney pulls it off and they sign it and then they send it back to you. So most of the time, you're not going to have all signatures on there at the same time.
And other.
If you happen to, just load it twice, load it in both holders, due
Okay,
diligence holder and earnest money holder.
gotcha. And everything except the due diligence where you can do it digital,
Mhm.
like the Venmo or whatnot. Everything else is basically has to be like a bank check and you hand deliver it,
It
right?
can be a wire.
Okay.
Yep. Any questions?
I have a few.
Okay,
Cooperative compensation form and the one-time show form.
yes.
How do we access that?
Everything is in, DocuSign. All of your forms are in DocuSign.
So the preload for the buyer side or whatever, when we go in command.
When you go into command, so, there are some, so I'm gonna tell you, when you click on, you've got your room, and you click on add a form. Then it asks you where you wanna add it from, you're gonna say DocuSign,
DocuSign.
yes. So then it's gonna pull up, and there are gonna be some things at the top that says KW buyer templates. Don't use anything in that box. It's all outdated.
Okay,
And I haven't figured out how to go in and update that part of it. I've got to somehow get with DocuSign in order to do that. Don't use anything that's in that box.
okay.
Go down to NCAR forms, and all of your updated forms are going to be there.
And just individually get them?
Yep, yep. Load everything into the room that you would need. So you're gonna have your buyer agency agreement, you're gonna have your working with real estate agents. You're gonna have you will have to go to a different tab. There is one on there that says KWC 832 that has all of your heritage title disclosures in there. Pull that into your room. You probably haven't created a room yet when it's a one-time showing.
Right.
So, so you can just go in and grab that document to take it with you.
Jose, do you have a list or something like what should be sit in with the contract?
Command is the list.
Okay,
Yes.
but if you're not using a template, you have to know which ones to pull individually, right?
So,
If you're not using the one that, like, where you click on buyer and it just brings them all in.
Right.
You said don't use those, right?
right, those are dated. Yes.
So you would have to know exactly which ones, you know what I'm saying, do we have like a list of that, and so we can memorize it, you know what I mean?
So when you start if you start your opportunity in command,
Mhm.
so start the opportunity in command, and then there's gonna be a button that says create transaction.
All right,
So if it is a buyer transaction, because you have to put what kind it is, if it's a buyer transaction,
it'll be in the list.
it's gonna pull you to DocuSign, and it's gonna have all of your buyer documents
The
in.
required stuff.
That is
And you
correct.
just looked up.
Yes,
stuff.
yeah.
Okay.
Not all of them are required, but it's gonna have all, in other words, because it might have non-exclusive buyer agency in there. But any of the buyer forms that you need, it will automatically pull you to the most updated.
I didn't think about that, okay.
Anything else?
When do we have the conversation about the cooperative conversation? Because I haven't had one since that change happened.
Yes, so both of those forms actually are covered next week. So next week is miscellaneous forms, so those are, additional provisions, when to use owner association addendum, one-time showing, Form 220, Form 770, which is a form that we may need to use to disclose further compensation. Termination forms that we don't use on a daily basis, yet when we need them, we need to know that when we do use them, are we using them properly and correctly?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's next week, miscellaneous forms.
Same day, same time?
Same day, same time, same bat channel if you're zooming.